Now let's bring in Lieutenant Colonel Michael Waltz, a former Green Beret commander, former counterterrorism advisor to Vice President Dick Cheney, and a Republican congressional candidate in Florida. Good to have you.
Thanks, Arthel.
Okay, so listen, we're certainly not beating a war drum here, but when you have the Homeland Security and counterterrorism advisor telling the president that an attack on Syria is not off the table, we bring in military experts like you for analysis.
Yeah.
So is a military maneuver the only response at this point?
Well, we've certainly seen that folks like Putin and Assad and the Iranian regime respect strength and often only respond to military force. You know, in this case, I think the president was absolutely right to call out both the Iranians and the Russians, as did Nikki Haley, for being complicit in these chemical attacks. Arthel, let me tell you why these things are so horrible. You know, these civilians in eastern Damascus have been under bombing and artillery shelling attacks now for months and months and months. And what they often do is they go to low ground. They go into basements and into ditches and other places to avoid the shelling. Well, guess where these chemicals settle and fall after they've been launched? They go right into those basements, killing dozens and dozens of women and children, and we just can't stand for it. Not only making a statement in the Middle East, but around the world that the United States, the West, will not stand for these kind of attacks.
So then I ask you then, you know, of course, without giving a roadmap, give us an idea of what would be the most effective military response and what other countries would have to be engaged in order for it to be successful.
Well, the key here is, you know, now that the Russians have stationed their Air Force and their units into Syria, is avoiding that escalation, is making a statement if we do move to the military option, as we did a year ago, and taking down Assad's capabilities, which I think we can do. We can parse out from the Russians. They are primarily located on an air base and then on a Navy base. Its only base in the Mediterranean in Tartus. So we need to separate the Syrian regime from the Russian capabilities. We can take those out with standoff weapons, and we can certainly make a statement of the Assad regime, both with long-range cruise missiles, from submarines, from surface ships, and from aircraft.
And how easy would it be to separate the Russians from the Syrians? And would this draw the U.S. into an unintended conflict with Russia?
Well, I think you have to look at the downside. You know, of course, there can be an escalation there, but Putin is playing a very weak hand. I would not be too concerned with too much of an escalation there. He does not have very strong military capability, has a very weak economy, and he's essentially been blustering, particularly under the Obama administration, for the last 8 years. So that is always a concern, but I would not let that outweigh the downside of doing nothing here and letting these war crimes continue.
A statement from State Department spokesperson Heather Nauert reads in part that these reports, if confirmed, are horrifying and demand an immediate response by the international community. So if President Trump does nothing, what are the consequences?
Well, the consequences are Assad is going to continue these types of atrocities, backed by both Russia and Iran. You're going to have and continue to have a major Iranian buildup just over the border with Israel. You continue to have groups like Hezbollah continue to gain ground, to gain more and more sophisticated weapons, and you allow, you know, the United States has to lead, and when we leave a vacuum, bad actors fill it. The United States is the leader of the free world. We have a relatively small presence there, less than 2,000 troops, to not only keep ISIS from returning, but preventing the entire region from exploding again and going back to where you have massive refugee flows into Europe, destabilizing Europe, that ISIS then infiltrates and uses to attack America.
Oh, quickly, I've got 30 seconds here, but did you tell me, because we've got some 2,000 troops left there in Syria, would the airstrikes and the suggestion that you just posed earlier, would that involve our troops on the ground there?
So those troops are farther east where the ISIS enclaves are and where the Kurds are located. It should not. However, we do have to think about retaliation against those troops. We had to think about that when President Trump ordered this a year ago, but the Russians wouldn't dare. They tried to send their own mercenaries into those areas a few months ago, and they walked away with a huge bloody nose where we killed over 400 Russian mercenaries.
Colonel Waltz, I leave it there.
All right.
and thank you for your service.